Well, welcome to Praxis, a podcast where we explore how to practice and embody the way of Jesus in our everyday lives. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Right now, we're in a short series on disability in the church, and I want to encourage you not to tune out. Did you know that roughly 17 to 20% of the population lives with a disability? That's far more people than many of us realize. Statistically, chances are high that either you or someone close to you is part of that number. Yet far too often, people with disabilities find themselves pushed to the margins. In a culture that tends to value people for what they can do or how much they can achieve, those with disabilities are frequently overlooked or perceived as having little to contribute. And while our society has made real progress towards greater inclusion, which we want to celebrate, we're convinced that inclusion alone is not enough, especially in the church. So in this series, we're exploring how to move beyond mere inclusion toward becoming communities of genuine belonging. And today we're going to have a conversation with a friend of ours, Nilda Rivera, who is not only disabled, but a minister. So let's get into it. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Mac, and today I'm sitting with two friends, Anna Walloved and Nilda Rivera. And Anna, I'll introduce you. This is your first time on Praxis.
Yeah.
Anna works in our front office. If you're part of our community, you know who Anna is. Because she leads worship regularly on the weekends. Fun fact, she's Josiah's sister, so they're related.
Yeah.
And as this conversation gets going, perhaps disability is not an abstract concept. It's something you're proximate to. And so I'm looking forward to any contributions you want to make from your own lived experience. Anna first introduced me to our guest today, Nilda. So why don't I turn it over to you to kind of give us some context of who Nilda is and welcome her to our show.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I am so excited to introduce Nilda. Nilda, I think your email came across our office at such an interesting time because we had just talked about doing a series on disability, and your email came in kind of telling us who you are, and I thought, oh my goodness, what a great opportunity for us. So Nilda is a minister with the Assemblies of God and serves as a missions associate with Special Touch Ministry, a non-denominational ministry that focuses on reaching and empowering people with disabilities. Nilda was born with spina bifida, and her life and ministry have been shaped by a deep desire to help others with disabilities discover their value, their purpose, and their place in the body of Christ, which I think is amazing, and I'm so excited to hear more about.
So welcome, Nilda. It's great to have you with us today.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored and humbled for this invitation, so thank you.
Yeah, we often start Praxis with just a little bit of a banter. We often throw out a fun question and then just kind of go back and forth a little bit. So I came up with one. This Sunday is daylight savings. And I wanted to hear from you and Anna. How do you feel about daylight savings? Is it a good thing, bad thing? Would you keep it or change it?
Well, the thought of an hour earlier, I'm not sure. But it's nice that we'll have daylight though, longer.
Yeah.
So it's a pro and con kind of thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have pretty strong feelings about it.
Well, let her rip, Anna. Make yourself known.
I am not a fan. I do like daylight, but I have 4 kids. So it doesn't matter to them what time the clock says. They will be up no matter what.
Yeah.
So we just get up earlier.
Yeah.
I also have strong feelings on this. My conviction is that we should head into daylight savings time here and then just keep it there.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's set the clocks forward an hour and then let's just hang there forever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
With more daylight into the evening.
Yes. I agree.
That's how I'm feeling about it. Well, I'm glad we could reach a spirit-led consensus. That feels good to me. It's a great way to start the podcast. Before we jump into your work, Nilda, as a minister and a missions associate with Special Touch, you have, I'd love to hear some of your story. You have a disability that I know that comes with a lot of challenges. So could you just tell us a little bit about your disability and share your story with our community of listeners?
Sure. So I have spina bifida, and with my level of spina bifida, it's what we call L3, and it's mine is from the waist down. So I have I'm not able to walk on my own. So I use a wheelchair for mobility. I did use crutches at one time, and then due to some surgeries that I had um, years ago, then I started to use my wheelchair um, full time. And so I have upper body. It's just from the waist down that
Okay.
I is the disability.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so yeah, so I was born with that, and I one of the things that I'm of Puerto Rican descent. My family, my parents were born in Puerto Rico, and they came here when they were young, and then so I was born, I was born here in this state, and I lived with my biological family until I was 5 years old, and then Milwaukee, the county that I lived in at the time, they felt that I would get better um, medical assistance and care if I was in foster care. And so at the age of 5, I was placed in foster care, and I was raised in foster care until the age of 18. Um, I, I lived in 4 different families, and 2 of the families were um, people I didn't know at the time, and then 2 of them were the last 2 families that I lived with were relatives.
Okay.
Um,
Wow. So spina bifida, this was something you were born with. So you've experienced this
yes,
your entire life.
correct.
And it affects you from the waist down. And
Yes.
so I imagine that comes with a lot of sort of daily challenges. As someone who raises a son with Down syndrome, I often forget that people maybe don't have access to like the day in and day out challenges of caring for someone with a disability or for someone who has a disability. So fill out for us, for someone who maybe doesn't know, what are some of the daily challenges you experience with your condition of spina bifida?
Well, I live on my own. I have my own apartment, and it's really not, the apartment itself is not considered accessible. However, God, I'm able, thank the Lord. I mean, it's worked. I mean, it's worked for 30 years. So, but however, that's the thing, is just being careful to making sure that I don't, I can't keep my balance, if I hold on to things. It takes me a little longer to do things, but I just have to do them differently, but I get it eventually done. And so that's the main struggle, is just making sure that I'm, I'm careful with, because of the lack of balance that I have.
That makes sense. And you narrated as part of your story, you're of Puerto Rican descent.
I am.
And so kind of a double minority here, Puerto Rican descent, and you live with a disability, and your parents your biological parents gave you up for foster care when you were 5 years old. 2 of the families you lived with, you didn't know, 2 of them were like relatives. How did you process that? Or how have you processed that transition into foster care? Did it feel, I don't want to project onto you, but I imagine there was some stuff to work through there, feeling like maybe you had been given up by your parents.
Yes. For a long time. I was angry. I was mad. I was, because I did feel that way, and they gave me up. They just gave me away. And one of the first family that I lived with, they were very abusive. And then the second family that I lived with, they were Christians, and they were different. And so I knew that, something was different, and, they seemed nice. And so it was through that family, excuse me, that I realized that I started to heal a little bit.
Hmm.
However, what was, and that's where I came to know Jesus, was through that family.
Mm.
So, to the second family that I lived with. Um, However, it wasn't until I was an adult that it was through a series of events when I was an adult that it was like that God showed me, through a message that I was at church one morning. It was Easter morning,
Hmm.
and I was at service, and the church that I went to, and he was talking about something completely different, with the Easter story. And then he started to talk about Jochebed,
Hmm.
the mother of Moses. And there, he said, how she put him in the basket, and, at 3 months old.
Yeah.
And he said, and to protect him, and things like that. And later on that afternoon, I was having a conversation with someone, a family member at a family gathering. And I told him, he went to the same church, and so he knew the sermon. He goes, yeah, when we were talking about that again, and he's like, yeah, what a sacrifice. And it was like, bing, a light went on. And I realized it wasn't that they gave me up. It was a sacrifice
Hmm.
for my better.
Yeah. So it sounds like obviously you had to process maybe some abandonment stuff. Like they gave
Right.
me up maybe because they didn't want me, or I was too much, or something like that. And
Because there was neglect issues too.
Mm.
Which was, when I was living with them, there was some neglect issues too. So,
yeah,
Okay.
but it was just because my dad didn't know.
sure.
Mhm.
But it sounds like in God's grace at a later time, especially after experiencing some of the sadness, grief, and anger of that, and sitting in the confusion, God communicated his love and care for you.
Mhm. Yes.
You
Yep.
alluded to something else a second ago, and you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but it sort of piqued my curiosity and deepened my sadness in your story, which is you alluded to some abuse that you experienced while in foster care, and it sounded
Mhm.
like that may have had an influence or shaped you in some way. Do you want to talk more about that, or is that something you'd want to move on from?
No, that we can. That's fine. So, m- thank you for asking, though. I when the first foster family that I went to were, they were very physically abusive,
Hmm.
and verbally, and, you know I believe there was some prejudice there. They were Caucasian, me, and, I thankfully was able to still go visit my family, um, like on the weekends and stuff. However, the reason I say there may have been prejudice is because they would always make derog- derogatory comments about my family when I
Hmm.
would come back home. And so there was their physical and emotional abuse in that family. So, and then later on in my teenage years, I did experience sexual abuse too,
Hmm.
at the hands of someone. Yeah. Um, but but God's grace, you know.
Yeah, fill that out for us a little bit. You just said God's grace, and I mean, this is hard stuff, Nilda. As I listen to your story, I'm like, my goodness. Not pity, but just deep, sort of in standing in solidarity, trying to see you and see things from your perspective and enter your story. You were born with a disability, given to foster care at age 5, experienced a lot of transitions, some of which
Mhm.
involved abusive environments, physically, verbally, and sexually. And here you are, and I'm not hearing someone who's enraged and stuck in bitterness. And that just makes me so curious. It makes me so curious about how you've leaned into God's presence and his desire to heal you and continue to move you in the direction of flourishing. So how did you experience God's grace in healing after experiencing a few abusive situations?
So it wasn't easy. It was not easy. That's for sure. And it was, it's a wound. And when wounds are used to heal, they have to be exposed, sometimes to the open, to be healed. And so that's not very comfortable. And so it was really interesting. God used different people to bring along the healing. I'll never forget I was at a church. It was shortly after I had rededicated my life to the Lord, because one of the families that I had lived with, it was when I was 14. It was relatives, and they weren't Christians. They weren't born again Christians. So it was very easy to just go back into the world. And so it was during that time that I experienced different abuses. And so when I was 24, I rededicated my life to the Lord, and I ended up going to the Lord led me to a church, back into the Assemblies of God, in a church near my home. And that pastor, I had not told anybody what had happened, with my one relative. And we all went to the same church, and I didn't feel that I could talk to someone there.
Yeah.
So one Sunday, shortly after I had started going to the church, the AG church that I started going to, we had a speaker come, and he spoke specifically on abuse and going through abuse and things. And, it just resonated with me. And so that day I felt, I have to talk to him, the pastor. And I was at church and tell him. And I was nervous, very nervous about talking to him. And so when I did, and then he said to me, I know your aunt and uncle who, and I was like, oh, great. That's why I was like, oh, great.
Yeah.
But then he said, don't you worry. I know that that's wrong. And so God used him very much in that church that I was at the time to be a real healing place for me. Just through speaking with pastor, and just through different things at home, and that through prayer, and like I said, was it easy? No, it was painful, but God is good, and he does that because he wants us to be better. He wants us to thrive in him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that took time.
Yeah.
That took time.
Yeah. So it sounds like you really felt called to step in and kind of share your story vulnerably with a pastor, and you were a little bit taken off guard when he mentioned your aunt and uncle, but I think it's so beautiful that he met you with, grace and compassion and helped you walk through that difficult time. That's really awesome.
Which can be rare. I mean, let's just pause there and say, at least as a pastor, I know this, that I've studied this issue more broadly, and just how often when people confess or share experiences with abuse, they're not taken seriously, or they're minimized and sort of pushed to the side. And so maybe
that's exactly how I was afraid of. Yeah.
Yes. And so what a gift to have a pastor who had some awareness to be able to see and hear what you experienced and take it seriously, and then be part of, joining you in whatever God wanted to do to bring about healing. And I think that's important for our listeners to hear, that when you maybe encounter people who've had or experienced abuse, that there's a type of response that's helpful, and there's a type of response that could be really, really hurtful.
Correct.
I also, as you were talking, was drawn to the idea that healing is a process. Yeah. And it can be painful. It takes time. But I wonder if we could just pause for a moment and talk, the three of us, about how you've experienced, like the process of healing. So maybe I'll kick us off. This is kind of gross, but at the end of the year, I had a couple moles removed.
Yeah.
And the biopsies came back, and it was like, oh, these aren't good. We need to take like bigger margins. So I just Tuesday went back for my second procedure to have like the second mole like removed. And right now I have like a big bandage on my right shoulder where they, took more out. And what I'm noticing is that for the first couple days, I've got a bandage on it. It's covered. It's very sensitive. I don't want to touch it or go near it. But after that, after maybe like 4 or 5 days, it'll be really important to like take the bandage off to give it increased air and exposure. And that like accelerates the healing process. And then within a few weeks, I'll be able to like move more around that area, eventually take the stitches out. And as you said that, you use the word light, like this wound was brought into the light.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of, I don't know, that image came to mind to go like, when there's a fresh wound, it needs to be covered. There needs to be like really good care and protection. And then there's like this gradual exposure to light in safe ways. And then from there we can start building.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that the danger can be we get these wounds, and I think especially like abuse, the thought of talking about it to somebody feels so scary. Often people never go even without saying anything. They hold it in their whole lives, and then that wound never heals. But I think that first step of exposing it or sharing your experience with someone can feel so scary. And even from personal experience, it can feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And you hold on to it so tight and you stress about it. Nilda, I'm sure you can, relate. And then once you finally talk about it, especially with a safe person, which I have done, and it sounds like you have done, Nilda, man, there's like this almost instant relief of like, oh man, I don't have to carry this alone anymore. This isn't just my own thing, and I think when given to somebody you can trust or in a community that you can trust, it can be very freeing.
Yeah, and that's a key word, trust. Yeah. I mean, Nilda, you went to a pastor who you felt like you could trust. I don't think it would be helpful to disclose something that personal, that sacred or nerve-wracking to someone who you don't know very well or you don't know you can trust. And that's where I think when people have shared tough things they've gone through with clergy or with Christians who don't know how to respond, that's where the pain can actually be amplified.
Yep.
So it's really important that we become trustworthy people and know how to relate to people's wounds.
Right.
And
there was.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, and then, that was like at the beginning, like right towards the beginning, where I started to, remember that had happened. And that was like my first time sharing with someone was him. And then later on, I brought into my life another pastor friend, a female, and she was very instrumental too, and became like a mentor too, and
that's cool,
helping me through that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think it's interesting how stories like that kind of unfold. Like God doesn't just demand we expose everything right away, but there seems to be this process as we begin to trust people and trust God that he's going to care for it, that it slowly unfolds, and healing, I think, can be a slow process, but definitely a beautiful one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Nilda, you had mentioned before, after, kind of running from God for some time, you said you came back to faith and eventually found yourself called to minister to other people. And I would love to hear more about how that came about for you.
Sure. So, when I was, back in 1997, actually 96, 97, I had met a friend at a church that I was attending, and she told me about a ministry that she was involved with at the time for people with disabilities, and it was Special Touch Ministry. And So I was like, okay. And so um, before that, I had seen flyers of it, like on a bulletin board, but I didn't really pay attention until I got to know this friend of mine. And so in 1997, I decided to go to one of they had what's called a winter retreat. Um, and I went, it's a weekend long, and I went there and I just loved it. I felt loved it.
Mm.
I was like, really, it was really a neat experience for the weekend. And at that retreat, they talked about the summer getaway that they have, and that's a week long getaway. And I was like, oh, I think I'll go there. I'll plan to go to it this year as a guest. So so I did, and I remember praying and asking God, Lord, just show me what you want to show me while I'm there. And He did. And it was kind of an ouch kind of experience for me, but it was good because, my disability, I mean, I have a disability. However, they have all disabilities in at the getaway, and including intellectual. And I I realized that, wow, that that I had pride in my heart.
Mm.
Like, oh, I don't have, my disability is not that bad, blah. And really, and the Lord really showed me, says, no, it's not that you're better. It's that it's just different.
Yeah.
Your disability is just different. And so I was like, ooh. And I'm like, okay, thank you, Lord. And another thing that God really showed me, and I just loved, is, you know, when it comes to worship and worship time, and how people would, everyone that was there with a disability, no matter how severe or how light, they, the worship was incredible. The freedom to worship God, no matter what, that gave me a new freedom to just worship God, just worship Him, no matter who you are,
Yeah.
what your ability, or not.
Yeah.
It doesn't. God just sees your heart, and just the freedom to worship. That's what I learned there. That's really what I learned there. In uh, at the getaway, the first year that I was there. So I was there as a guest. I would go as a guest for, I think, about 7 years. I think I did.
Okay.
And then in 2004, I think it was, I think, I remember that, how much care the caregivers gave me, and how blessed I was by them, and how they took care with me. And so I was like, I wanted to try that. And so I said, I actually, filled out an application that year to be a caregiver. And so I was a caregiver, and the people that I was with were four intellectually, those had intellectual disabilities, women, where basically they just they could do physically everything on their own. They just mainly needed like supervision.
Yeah.
And I remember that. I did that for 4 years, and then just getting into, so it was just a blessing to be able to minister and pour into them, and they poured into me too.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got started. And then in 2013, um, I had gone to, I had knew that I felt God wanted me to become a missions associate. And it was, I felt that God wanted me to be a missions associate with them, the Special Touch Ministry. And so I did. I filled out paperwork and did the process to become a missions associate. And then, in 2015, I kind of did like a reboot, kind of starting again, because it was new to me, so I wasn't really doing the budget raising like I was supposed to.
Sure. Yeah.
And so then he let us start over.
Okay.
And so I did. And yeah. And so here I am.
You know,
Um,
Nilda, there are a few things that you've just narrated that stand out to me. One is you talked about the worship that you experienced at Special Touch Ministry and how free it was. And what's interesting is that experience you had comports with my experience worshiping alongside individuals with disabilities. We have a group of adults who worship with us on the weekends occasionally, and they just worship so freely, so passionately, honestly, quite frankly, more passionately and freely than most adults.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, we have so much to learn from these folks because everybody else is too self-conscious and like thinking about how I might look or appear.
Yeah.
Anna, you narrated like, man, I kind of walked out. It felt dry. Tell that story a little bit.
Yeah. I was leading worship a couple of weeks ago, and the set was a great worship set. But sometimes the congregation comes in tired, or they're maybe not quite ready to engage. And this group of people that Max said came in a song late. But they always are in the front row, and they just started worshiping like so expressively, and I was instantly rejuvenated in my spirit. So, I totally can see where you're coming from, like the freedom that they have to just express themselves in worship, and the way that that's contagious. At least for me, that was my experience. Like I left that worship that feeling like, oh my goodness, God, you did something so cool.
Yeah, they have something to teach us.
Absolutely.
They're modeling something for us that we need to grow into, which leads to the second thing that stood out to me. As you narrated your story, you talked about how God had to deal with some pride in your heart because you looked at other people who had a more severe disability, and God sort of, and maybe that like contributed to an attitude of pride or superiority that God had to sort of gently point out to you. And I just think that's another area to pause and for our listeners to lean in. That might be surprising that someone who has a disability could like maybe have an attitude of superiority to someone else who has a more severe disability. I think one of the things that blocks interpersonal reciprocal relationships with people with disabilities is that attitude in our hearts. Yeah. And I just think it's such a good learning lesson to go, if God dealt with you in that area, imagine how much more he might have to deal with someone who's listening who doesn't have a disability relating to someone who does. I think there's a lesson there for all of us.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and then there's just the final thing that stands out about your story, at least to me as I was listening, is that it started with you receiving the love and care of a ministry with special touch, and then eventually it led to you participating and giving yourself away. And I also think there's something really beautiful about that, because so many people I know orient to church in the first phase, what can I receive? And they never graduate into the second phase that you've modeled, which is, okay, having received this love and care, I now want to participate in extending that to other people through service and love.
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes, we're sponges. That's what we're supposed to be, sponges. And sponges, if you just keep it in, they start to stink. And so, well, it's true.
We're sponges, but don't be a stinky sponge.
Don't be a stinky, dirty sponge.
Don't be a stinky sponge. Squeeze it. Let's just squeeze.
Yeah, you got to get filled up and then squeezed, and filled up and squeezed. Otherwise, you start to stink.
I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so so it's, we receive to give, that's, we want to pour out. And so that's what, that's what I thank the Lord that he's able to use me to be able to pour out and to receive too.
Yeah. I want to shift gears for a moment. I want to first just pause and say thank you so much for sharing vulnerably and courageously some really sacred parts of your story with us. And I have so much respect for you, and I'm just so grateful that our listeners get to hear your story. In this series, one of the things we're putting our finger on again and again is moving beyond inclusion and considering places where we experience genuine belonging. And I just wonder for you, what ways, can you relate to that distinction between just being included and experiencing real belonging as someone with a disability? And how have you, as someone with a disability, been part of communities where it feels sort of limited to inclusion in ways that are maybe hurtful or harmful to you?
Sure. Yeah, there is quite a big difference, inclusion. Oh yeah, you can be here and we'll minister to you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We'll minister to you and we'll take care of you. However, it's okay, when it comes to inclusion, that's different, because then you're like, hey, how can we work together?
Yeah.
How can you contribute with us?
Mm.
And that's, and I've experienced, and I still do experience, I'll be honest, there's times I still do experience the, oh, okay, I'm glad you're here. That's great.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
we'll just minister to you.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's like, you know, hmm, I can help too,
Yeah.
And however, and the church that I attend now, um, I'm thankful that I'm able to be a part of. I've been a part of the choir when the choir is going on. Not right now, but and there's kids worship that happens, and so I've been a part of that. A leadership team, and so that's been that to me, that's inclusion,
Yeah.
because they're allowing they're wanting to me they're allowing me to use, they see the gifts that God, they're allowing me to use my gifts, and seeing beyond. To me, that's seeing beyond the disability.
Yeah, I hear you saying there's a difference. The difference you've experienced is being a part of an environment where they're ministering to you
Mhm.
rather than being part of an environment where they minister with and alongside of you.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can take us a little bit deeper into that first experience when you've been part of a community or had relational exchanges where it feels like someone is saying, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. Now, what can I do for you?" How does that make you feel on the inside? What impact does that have on you?
Well, I was just thinking about something just yesterday and this morning, kind of along those lines. I'll give you this example. You can tell me if I'm in the right direction or not. But so, like, people, when I'm doing something or reaching for something or trying to get working on something, and someone comes up to me and they say, "Oh, do you need some help?" I said, "No, I'm good.
Mm,
No, I'm good. Thank you. I got it." "Oh, you sure?" I'm like, "No, I'm good. Thank
Yeah.
you." That that's irritating when it's like, "Oh, are you sure?" I'm like,
mm,
"Yeah, I'm sure."
mhm.
And I actually just had that. I love them dearly. Just I had that happen the other day. Someone asking me like 3 times, "Are you sure you don't want it?" I'm like, "No, I'm good, thank you."
Yeah.
So so that's kind of, I don't know if that kind of answers that, but to me, that's like, really, I'm okay. I can get this.
Yeah, because it's undercutting your own ability to do things.
Yeah,
It's almost like selling you short.
yeah.
And I'll just confess to you, there have been times like with my son Griffin.
Mhm.
He is 11 years old. He has Down syndrome and autism, and we care for him daily in lots of ways. And yet there's still patterns that we can get into, I've noticed, where we're like doing something for him. And then sometimes an outsider will come in and just expect him to do it. And we're like, wow, he did that. And here we've been doing it for him.
Yeah.
My wife, Josie, this was probably like, I don't know, within the last year. So it wasn't recent, but within the last year, she took him to the dentist. And at the end, I don't know what the name is, the dental hygienist or whoever's working with him, prompted him. They had like this little like chest full of toys or something like that for kids after they make it through. Because let's face it, the dentist isn't fun.
Yeah.
So
Real white
I
knuckling it.
know.
yeah, but at the end, she just kind of said to Griffin in a normal adult voice, hey, Griffin, go pick out a toy in the chest or whatever. And I think both Josie and I wasn't there, but Josie was, and she thought in her brain, like, he's not going to understand that. Like, you've got to repeat it, or, like, it's got to be more accessible. And without, like, maybe he was just in a good moment, I don't know, but like, he heard her, walked right over there and grabbed a toy, like, kind of surprising her a little bit. And I just think, as a parent who is raising someone with a disability, to kind of get after what you're talking about, like keeping that filter on at all times, that like doing something for someone else that they are not only capable of doing, but want to do, is something we have to be intentional about. In fact, I believe that people are often way more capable than we give them credit to. And we have to be on guard and cautious about undercutting that.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of, go ahead, Nilda.
No, go ahead. I'm just saying I agree.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of reminds me. My oldest daughter has a severe intellectual disability. And this fall, she went on her first camp, like a youth camp retreat. And I came with her to kind of just, maybe I was mama-ing too much, but I just kind of wanted to help
Probably.
her out. Anyway, before we went, she wanted to get a new Bible. So she got like a new Bible and fun pens, and she was just so excited about it all. And we're in the dorms with all her friends, and I noticed that she gets her Bible out. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And my oldest daughter, she can't read, I think, past a kindergarten grade level, right? So she's opening the Bible, and she gets her highlighters out. She's just like going to town on this Bible. And there's part of me that's like, man, I know she can't comprehend, and she's probably not even reading it. I should probably go and help her, whatever. I decided to go to the bathroom first. Went to the bathroom. I came back out, and there's Jayla still highlighting her Bible. But now every girl in the room had their Bibles out, and they were reading them, and they were talking about what they were reading in their Bible. And I just had this moment like, man, sure, I could have went over and corrected, or like, hey, you know what you're doing? But then it would have missed the opportunity for Jayla's, desire to know God in whatever capacity that means for her to influence the entire room full of middle school girls,
I love that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I think you've put your finger on something that I definitely want to hold on to, and I hope our community can, that when we are welcoming individuals with disabilities who are an essential part of our community, our primary orientation isn't what can we do for you, but it's how can you join us in what we're doing together.
Yes.
And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things, I was looking, because I was looking over the questions, and you were talking about things that I've seen that, made that are not helpful and things. And like, what's really neat is there's people with disabilities, other people with disabilities that come to church too, where I attend. And, sometimes I see where it's kind of like, I think of my one friend he is in a wheelchair. He has a cerebral palsy, and he's blind also. And so, me, I'll talk to somebody, I'll go up and talk to you.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah. And where he's more, stand back, but I understand. But if you talk to him, he talks fine. And just how some people, with me, they'll talk to me, but him, it's kind of like they're kind of not sure. And I'm almost like, what the heck? That gets me. I'll be in my head. I'm like, why do they feel funny around him? But it's like, and sometimes the overlooking, I think that's a big thing. That I kind of, and I don't know if you have seen this, as a parent, but the overlooking of people in the church.
Yeah. So say more about that. How have you experienced being overlooked?
Well, I'll use my one friend who's visually and physically impaired. He, a lot of times he can't get, out of the church by himself. And sometimes people, I've seen it where I'm like, where's so-and-so? Oh, he's still in the church. I'm like, somebody didn't get him? And it's like, however, I'll be honest, and this was where the empowering, I think, kind of goes, because then after a while, I asked him, I said, can you hear people that are around you? And he's like, yeah, I hear them talking. I said, well, then maybe you can speak up
Right.
and say, hey, could someone help me?
Mm.
Hey, oh, so, but, so that's like, yeah, that kind of gets me too. It's like,
Yeah, it's
you,
almost like this
you see
this
the need.
yeah, it's almost like this friend of yours
Mhm.
who is blind and physically impaired has been overlooked
Yeah.
for so long and so consistently that he's perhaps doesn't know how to exercise his voice and asking for help.
Yep. I
And
never thought, yeah, yes, I think that's exactly what it was. And now he's gotten better though. He's gotten a lot better, where he's like, especially like he won't know somebody's, and then I'll start, if I see somebody, I won't, I purposely will not ask, hey, so can you push? No, because I'll say, hey, how are you? So he can know that someone's there, and then he can ask.
yeah. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I hear underneath this, part of what you're saying too is that we tend to relate to people on our own terms. So
Mhm.
not everybody with a disability is going to relate the same way or even have the same capacity for interaction. And if we
Mhm.
go in with like a preconceived idea of what we are looking for or what that type of interaction needs to be like, it can
Mhm.
very much limit us from meeting someone where they're actually at.
Mhm.
And as I'm listening to you, I almost kind of am visualizing like a continuum of engagement. And so on the far end of the spectrum, in terms of barriers, I'm seeing just like overlooking people with disabilities, which we see throughout the Gospels. I mean, there are
Yep.
times when people are rebuking people with disabilities who are calling out for Jesus because they're not considered important enough of Jesus's attention. So they're being overlooked, they're being silenced and hushed.
Mhm.
Once we get beyond, overlooking is not the heart of Jesus, we can create environments of inclusion, but sort of the default in terms of engagement is sort of, how do I help and serve you, the person with a disability? And
And
that's an improvement so far as it goes from simply overlooking that person. But I think what we're trying to name in this series, and I hear you giving voice to through your personal experiences, is being ministered to is very different than having people relate to me as a human being with
Mhm.
something to contribute.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And I want our church to be moving towards that third category.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because yeah, exactly. And like, you know, do I still experience that with the overlook and being overlooked and kind of things, although I'll speak up more.
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak up, but there'll be times where I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you will speak up, and that's why I mean, you've got like this tenacity
Mhm.
that I love about you, Nilda, and so you kind of push in and elbow your way into these spaces. And what I'm kind of thinking is, but what about all the individuals with disabilities who maybe don't have that underlining tenacity or
Mhm.
courage, and what are we missing out on from those people,
Yeah.
right? And,
Exactly.
and so I wonder, one thing we touched on was that, like, it seems as though individuals with disabilities embody worship in a way that the rest of us, quite frankly, need to learn how to do. I'm wondering, what other themes or things would you name that you think the church might be missing out on if we learned or spent more time learning and attending to our friends with disabilities?
You hit the word right there. Is be a friend.
Yeah.
Friend,
Hmm.
because you'll know, that's the only way you'll know the treasure, is if you decide to friend someone with a disability and you
Yeah.
take the time to get to know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because friendship is a two-way street,
Yep.
and I just think of, a friend that I've made later in life. Our friendship kind of just started because I needed advice, really. And I was going through a really hard season. And it felt one-sided for a while. And then all of a sudden, I remember getting a call one day, and she called me, hey, Hannah, I'm going through this hard time. I just want to talk about it. I want prayer. And it's like something just kind of switched in our dynamic. It wasn't just, hey, I need something from you. It was, oh, I have something you want too. And it like that just, it's belonging, I think. I think that if you can name it, I think you're right. I think friendship, and not just thinking, oh, what can I offer this person with a disability? Because the reality is they have as much to offer you as you think you have to offer them, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nilda, I know one of the things you're super passionate about is special touch ministry. And you've alluded to what a role it's played in your own life and how you eventually were sort of called into a place of serving and even leading there. We have several families in our community that have loved ones who have disabilities. And I just imagine maybe this ministry has piqued their curiosity. So could you tell us a little bit more about that and how those who are interested might reach out or get involved?
Sure. So Special Touch Ministry has been around actually for 43 years. And it is, it has, was started by a couple, and their name was Charlie and Debbie Trivers. Charlie has since gone to be with the Lord in 2021. And they have different aspects of the ministry. And one of their main evangelistic arm is a summer getaway. And that getaway, I'm going to touch on that a lot because so the summer getaway is held in 7 different states. And it's a 1-week camp like retreat from Monday through Friday. And it is for those with all disabilities. And the way that it's structured is there is a schedule. It's green and a yellow green schedule, yellow schedule. And the green schedule, all the activities, the chapel, recreation, is all geared towards those with intellectual disabilities.
Okay.
So the morning chapel that they would have is like kind of like almost not quite as low as a children's church, but kind of more like almost like a middle school youth group kind of a feel.
Okay.
And then the recreation that they have is a structured event for those with intellectual disabilities. And then there's the yellow schedule, and the yellow schedule is for those with physical disabilities only. So intellectually they're sound. They
Yep.
sound.
Yeah.
So their morning chapel is more like a Bible study and a life group kind of a feel.
Sure.
And then their recreation time is more of an open rec where they're pretty free to do what they want, but there's games. However, the games that they have, that we have for that yellow schedule is usually like a board games, or I think, thinking more of a, intellectual thinking kind of a game. So, I had mentioned that I was a caregiver, but then for 2 years, I also did the rec
Oh, fun.
for
that.
the yellow schedule. So I did that too. And so then at night, we have a main service.
Okay.
For everybody, and there's a speaker, and everybody comes together for the main service.
Neat.
Nice.
So, yeah, and so there are people that come there, and that's their first exposure to Jesus, and they might come, and what we want them to have a good time, yes, but we want it to be pointing them to who loves them the most, and that's Jesus.
I love that.
So that's a Monday through Friday, and there's a cost to that. For those with physical disabilities, let's say they need to have one-on-one care, they would need to provide their own caregiver, someone to come with them to be able to to provide the care for them if they need one-on-one,
Sure.
hands-on.
Sure.
Yeah. And then, but then the ones that come as a volunteer, as a caregiver, they would be people, or we would be people that work with individuals that usually intellectual disability, but they can take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
They
mean,
just-
it's a robust undertaking to have
Yeah.
this program running in 7 states, week-long retreat with
Mm-hmm.
2 tracks, one for, physical disabilities, the other one for a cognitive one. And
Yep.
all that that's a big undertaking.
It is.
I'm so glad you're a part of that. One of the things we love to do, we end every episode with on Praxis. We call it Praxis time because it points to the word practice. We never want our listeners to just kind of listen to a conversation and then walk away. We always want to give them things that they can do or try on in response to the conversation that they've listened to. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe help our listeners imagine what they could do. What's a practice that they could try on after listening to this conversation?
It's just to be a friend, to not be afraid, to not be afraid to just say hi and get to know someone with a different disability, because it could really lead into something special that God could open up. So that's the big thing, is to just be a friend to someone.
Yeah.
So one really practical thing our listeners could do, having listened to this conversation, is to move towards someone with a disability with the desire to establish a friendship rooted in, as Anna, you named, reciprocity or mutuality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anna, what would you say? Any practices?
Well, I feel like Nilda took mine.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just teasing. Yeah, I think I was thinking the same thing. Friendship. I think everybody listening knows at least one person, either with a physical or intellectual disability. So maybe your practice this week is just to do one thing that levels that playing field a little bit. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's you opening up and being vulnerable with them. I think sometimes our own anxiety stops us from reaching across the table from someone who's different than us. So maybe trying to put that aside and just do one thing, whether it's church or on Sunday morning or school or something throughout the week that would help you engage in a mutual friendship with somebody.
Yeah, I might deepen that by giving a little more access to how to do that.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed in parenting Griffin as a conduit to friendship is not only meet them where they are, but take interest in the thing they're interested in.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe someone might go, okay, but fine, make a friend. How do I do that? I just think as a default, the way in is to meet them where they're at and then take interest in what they're interested in, let them determine what your interaction should look like. Give them agency.
Yeah. With Jayla, that would be cats. You talk to her about cats. My
or
oldest.
hot dog buns with mustard, I've learned. She
Yes.
loves that.
My oldest loves hot dogs and mustard. Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't say this, Anna.
Yeah.
Kind of an oversight on your part, if I'm going to be honest, is learn from individuals with disabilities how to worship.
Yeah.
That seems like it would benefit you. So if you're part of our church and you're that guy who every time Anna comes out to lead worship, who's standing there with your hands in your pockets, watching other people sing, knock it off. Look up front to that front row and learn how to worship like them. Because God is taking great delight in that front row.
100%.
Yeah.
Love that.
And then I might say, as a practice, I really like that idea of, we kind of talked about that spectrum from overlooking to serving alongside. And I want to say, as a practice, maybe try to invite people into the thing you're doing rather than do something for them.
Love that.
So, hey, we're doing this. Do you want to join us? Rather than, do you need help from me? I think could be a good practice moving forward. So make a friend, learn how to worship, and come alongside going, do you want to join us? Do you want to contribute with us?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Because you'll be surprised. We do. So many of us do. We want to be able to contribute.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nilda, for joining us for this conversation today. It's been so great to connect with you again.
Yes.
And I want to thank our listeners, too, for tuning in. Exciting news for our listeners. For our next episode, we're going to have Katie Igg back with us. She'll be back from maternity leave, and we'll be kicking off a brand new series. So stay tuned, and we will see you next time.
God bless.
All right. Take care, Nilda.
Thanks, Nilda.
Thank you so much.
Praxis is recorded and produced at Crosspoint Community Church. You can find out more about the show and our church at crosspointwi.com. If you have any questions, comments, or have any suggestions for future topics, please feel free to send us an email. Also, if you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.